Legend of Zelda is, when you think about it, kind of like pie. Often found on best of lists, enjoyed in many different forms, a staple at Thanksgiving dinner. Some are a bit meatier, while others tend to lean fruity. To help put forth this idea, I've got imagine apple pie. Entirely good in its own right. A couple years after apple pie, though, apple pie a la mode hits the scene, making 2013 a real exciting time for people who love apple pie. It's just like they remember it, with just enough added here to make it worth enjoying again. A lot of people are happy to have apple pie again, and whether or not they're big on ice cream, it doesn't hurt the experience in any way, just makes it good in a different direction. They've even adjusted the apple pie recipe to better reflect the new era we're in, which is nice. Even though I personally am not a fan of the way apple pie a la mode is plated, it's still very enjoyable, and it's not like the original apple pie recipe has been overwritten by this new thing. Trying to get your hands on that original recipe might be tough though. They stopped running the recipe book it was originally printed in, and people are not likely to let go of their copy. Honestly though, you'd probably just have better luck finding that recipe online somewhere. Fans of apple pie have even made some pretty solid alterations to the recipe over the years for those that want to shake things up a little bit. For the record, I am not a professional baker or anything, and I can acknowledge that. I'm just a big fan of apple pie. Pie in general for that matter. I can even see the value in the pies that are largely underappreciated these days. Either way, despite having most of my experience on the enjoyer side of the whole pastry process, that hasn't stopped me from imagining writing my own recipes. I'm not sure I could do that. Just reading the acknowledgments in a cookbook will give you an idea as to how much love and effort and years of learning the skill it takes to bake something, let alone something as special as apple pie. I love apple pie. I often find myself craving it, and even when I'm enjoying a different dessert, sometimes I'll notice something that makes me think, hey, I think these bakers might be pie fans. Over the years, I've probably enjoyed apple pie a few dozen times, and every time I find something new to enjoy. Obviously, apple pie isn't perfect, and I'm not immune to noticing its shortcomings even if I am one of the biggest apple pie defenders out there. Over the years, people have been keen to point out that there's a lot of pie filling compared to how much apple there actually is in the pie. Personally, I find the filling is just as important as the apples, but I can see why people would enjoy a more consistent pie, like sweet potato. Speaking of, I do think sweet potato pie is good, but honestly, ube pie does everything that sweet potato pie does, while also being a unique twist on a classic, and I enjoy that a fair bit. If you're unfamiliar with desserts altogether though, I definitely think anyone looking to enjoy pie should start with pumpkin pie. It's a classic for a reason, and you can enjoy it with or without the crust according to your taste. Obviously, pumpkin pie with crust is far more popular, but crustless is the way that my grandma used to do it, so that's mine. That's the one that I like. That is the one that I like. The Wind Waker is a Zelda experience that's so different from everything else the series has to offer, and yet it perfectly scratches that itch for exploration and adventure. The original idea for The Legend of Zelda was inspired by Shigeru Miyamoto's experience exploring the Kyoto countryside, where he encountered the ruler of a long-dead kingdom and bird people and this guy. So when you think about it, The Wind Waker really captures that idea in ways that no other titles would until the most recent releases. Speaking of recent releases, around the time of its release, it was revealed that Tears of the Kingdom was actually finished a full year before that, which allowed the team working on it plenty of time to fine-tune and make adjustments until the game was aligned with their vision. This was huge, especially in an industry where companies rely on crunching their bakers to squeeze out their desserts as fast as possible. Over the years, the gaps between these releases have gotten bigger, and personally I believe that this is at least in part due to the tight timeline The Wind Waker was developed on. See, back in September of 2001, the GameCube started to hit shelves, and Nintendo wanted to make sure that it had the most impressive, most innovative, most phenomenal games available for people to enjoy as soon as possible. Little over a year later, on December 13th of 2002, The Wind Waker was released. Given the fact that development started in 2000, this game was likely developed in less than 3 years, though the exact amount of time is a little bit tricky to pin down. For something attempting to bring so much new stuff to the table, it's no wonder The Wind Waker had so many cool ideas left on the cutting room floor. All this to say, despite being as delicious as it is, a lot of compromises were made to make this apple pie work for the tight time restraints of this baking competition. With this in mind, I don't think the ever-increasing time between releases is a coincidence. Finding out about that extra year has had my mind racing. What if every game was given that treatment? What if my favorite game was given that treatment? Obviously, the most realistic answer is that some of that oh-so-elusive cut content would have found its way back into the game, but other more well-researched people have compiled all of that interesting stuff already, so this project is mostly just my ideas. This is me looking at that apple pie recipe and looking over at apple tarts and apple crumble and taking the stuff that I like and finding a place for it here. I'm very generous with the cinnamon, but I promise it'll still taste like apples. I want this project to be enjoyable even if you've never eaten apple pie, but I do think at least having some familiarity with the way it tastes would improve your experience. Maybe like talk to a friend, watch a commercial, check out a video of somebody eating pie and commenting on it after every bite. Something that I find really enjoyable is listening to somebody talk for hours at a time about dessert that changed their life, and this is that. Look at these. And with that, I'm pretty sure I've stretched this pie analogy as far as I can, so I'm about ready to lift anchor and with that, I'm pretty sure I've stretched this pie analogy as far as I can, so we have our heading. Here we go. When reduced down to its most basic ideas, The Wind Waker is a game about sailing and island exploration. While traveling the sea, we can find these fishermen who make their homes in the waters near each island. Tossing bait to them will make them pop out of the water to crack wise, update your chart to include the closest island, and then provide a hint about some nearby point of interest before returning beneath the waves. I love these little guys. Actually, when I was but a wee fruit stellateur, I thought they were all the same little guy who just traveled the entire sea in the same way we do, but no, they're each their own character. If you also thought this little community of cartographers were the same one guy, you'd be forgiven, because effectively they all are the same one guy. They all talk the same, they all share the same model, and they all seem to be acupuncture enthusiasts. At the end of the day, I have a lot of respect for the fishmen. The fishmen are great, but I have a bone to pick with them. One of the things about the Wind Waker that I think holds it back is its map. Not the map, but the map. There are 49 sectors in the Great Sea, each being home to one island, all laid out in a nice and easy 7x7 grid. This system works well enough, and it allows for players to know exactly what to expect while exploring the uncharted sea. The problem here arises when the dots are connected and people realize that the best thing to find in each sector is an island, and if the island you just happen to visit is a real stinker, that's pretty much all you're gonna get out of this entire square of the map, which in the long run doesn't really matter all that much, because even if you do end up visiting an island you regret charting, you're not gonna have to look at it again, as only 11 of the 49 islands in the game make an appearance on the actual map. And yeah, while it's kinda obvious that these 11 are the most important in the game, it's a shame that at a glance it looks like there's a vast nothingness between them. The problem here isn't one with the gameplay, but is more of a result of a less than ideal presentation. Having just recently played it again for the 12th time, the average Wind Waker playthrough will have you looking at this chart for cumulative hours. This isn't really the kind of thing I want to look at for cumulative hours. As is, this chart doesn't really scream adventure on the high sea, and to that I ask, what's stopping me from making this chart scream? The answer is that there is nothing stopping me from making this chart scream, especially once I get my sticky little grabbers on it. After playing around for a bit, I landed on this concept for a chart that's a bit more visually appealing. The first step was really removing that grid. The angularity wasn't really doing the Great Sea any favors. From there, I wanted to separate it into sectors that all had their own distinct shape to help it feel like each of these areas had a bit more personality. For the most part, these sectors are home to one main island and a secondary island, those being the ones with ties to the main quest, as well as a handful of smaller islands to help add some additional places to check out during our leisurely outing. Filling in your chart would still work the same way. Feeding the fishmen is just a good bonding time, but instead of each island clearing up its respective sector, only a small area around the island would be revealed, with the full sector being revealed once each island has been found, which adds more incentive to visiting all of the islands. In addition to that, the sense of completion felt from filling in your entire sea chart is spread out into smaller chunks over the whole game. Obviously, each sector can't be fully explored when you first enter them, as you don't really get the chance to freely explore until later on in your adventure, so there's a bit more incentive to return to islands you've been to before, even if it's just to get your bearings. And I think this goes without saying, but every island should be present on the actual map. It just makes it easier to know where things are at a glance, and makes it feel a lot more full. For those of you with a deep familiarity with this game, or if you've just been paying close attention, you're a good egg if that's you. Keep it up, sport. You get a gold star. You'll notice some of these islands have been shuffled around. For the most part, this was just an attempt to put some distance between the islands with similar gameplay, and as an added bonus makes it so none of our new sectors have more than one dice island within its borders. There are also some other smaller changes, but we've got time. We'll look at that later. It's no biggie. Also, like, there's 7 sectors, like the 7 seas. Isn't that just like cool? Because it's like a pirate adventure, sailing the 7 seas and swashbuckling and scurvy and all that. Yar! Already, I feel like the more natural shape of these borders lends to a more pleasing visual experience. Okay, so what about the gameplay experience? Now, I don't want to give anybody the impression that the sea is just here as beautiful set dressing with nothing to do. While engaging with everything the Wind Waker has to offer, there's actually a sizable chunk of things to check out. There are a good number of these platforms out and about, both of the shooty and non-shooty variety, which are all home to a selection of monsters and a treasure chest or two. While a majority of these platforms will only yield rupees or monster spoils upon plundering them, a good handful of them are home to rewards like heart pieces and treasure charts. On the other hand, while there are far fewer submarines on the Great Sea, all of them are worth investigating, as each of them is home to either a treasure chart, heart piece, or one of the few special charts. You can even find an empty bottle in one of these things. This bottle is such a clever treasure to put here, see, because it's more than likely that this submarine would be the first of the submarines that we find, really hammering home that these things are worth investigating when you find them. Outside of the platforms and submarines, there's also a couple of sea creatures and enemy ships that spend their time floating out here. The best of which being these big octos, which are, well, I guess the name is kind of self-explanatory. Either way, they're cool. The only friendly faces you'll find at sea are the Salvage Corps, which is this group of funny treasure hunters you can find in various locations, and Beetle, who's a traveling merchant who sells a number of goods to Link. While it would take him a couple more appearances to become as widely beloved as he is, this Beetle will always hold a special place in my heart. Little weirdo. There's also Old Man Ho-Ho, this telescope enthusiast who shows up on several islands and helps point Link in the direction of something interesting, if by accident. He doesn't really talk to you more than he talks to himself, and we get to listen. In Phantom Hourglass, it's maybe implied that this guy is actually many different identical guys, but I like the idea that he's just an avid traveler and likes to look at stuff from afar, at least in this game. He doesn't really count for what I'm getting at here because he's only present on certain islands as opposed to out at sea. I only bring him up because of this one really funny encounter near the Forsaken Fortress that really does make me question just how this guy gets wherever he's going. All that to say, there's really only two kinds of encounters to be had while at sea, which is really too bad because it doesn't need to be this way. These three fine citizens of Windfall Island all claim to be sailors, but they're all talk. Not once have I seen these guys out on the ocean. They don't even show up on other islands to imply that they've sailed there. Now, I'm not one to judge. Personally, I'm something of a homebody myself, but it's not like I go around telling people I'm big into backpacking. If these guys are such fans of sailing, surely they can name 5 of her songs. Just 5 of them. Come on, guys. These guys claim to be sailors, but I doubt. My doubt would be washed away, though, if they were just out on the ocean sometimes. Just something as simple as putting these characters in a little boat and plopping them somewhere out in the world would be enough. They don't even need to move around or anything. Okay, so why are they out here? I love trading sequences, regardless of how lengthy or involved they might be. In the case of this little crew, I'd be content with a simple 4-stop sequence that can be started by talking to any of them. Having the sequence be an open experience would make it more accessible, building on that freedom of exploration that the Wind Waker is so fond of. Upon speaking to the first sailor in this chain, he would say that we caught him at just the right time as he's taking a little break to enjoy his lunch. When he goes to open his lunch sack, however, he'd notice he's accidentally brought the wrong lunch bag and is embarrassed that he didn't realize until now because he and his sailor friends have color-coordinated lunches to match their boat. He doesn't really feel like tracking down the other sailors right now to get this sorted out, so he asks us to do him a solid and find his buddies for him. He promises to make it worth our while, and from there he points us towards where his friends are supposed to be. It's up to us to locate the other 2 sailors, and after a bit of running around, all the sailors would have their proper lunches, and talking to the first sailor again would get us our reward. What would the reward for this little errand be? A really cool story choice was made with Great Fish Isle. People familiar with the structure of Zelda games coming off of Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time, or even those just starting to recognize the pattern of travel to an island, clear a dungeon, help a group of people, and collect a goddess pearl, were in for a surprise upon arriving at Great Fish Isle. As we draw nearer, the destruction is made clear. Great Fish Isle has been torn apart by Ganondorf's magic. This moment genuinely had me in shock when I was younger, like jaw on the floor, had to set the controller down for a second, shock. This moment really shows how big of a threat we're facing and kicks off what is now my favorite section of the game. From this point on, until Link finds the next goddess pearl, the sun won't rise, the storm won't relent. The jaunty tune that usually plays as we traverse the sea is replaced with a more foreboding rendition. We face the endless night. This is just one of many fantastic story beats in the Wind Waker, and despite the destruction of what would have been the 3rd dungeon likely being tied to the development team running short on time, I think what we ended up getting in this moment was truly special, and I wouldn't trade that for any dungeon. Something I do think that could be expanded here is the aftermath of this event. Based on the wreckage, it's clear that people used to live on Great Fish Isle, and I've always wondered what happened to them. Something the first 2 dungeons have in common is that in addition to just solving some puzzles and beating a boss, Link is actively lending a hand to the people whose lives are directly impacted by what's happening in those dungeons. Clearing Dragon Roost Cavern will calm the Great Valoo, allowing young Rito like Prince Kamali to be granted wings, and clearing the Forbidden Woods would allow the Koroks to proceed with their annual ceremony, during which they travel to smaller islands in an attempt to help the forest grow. With Great Fish Isle destroyed and the people who used to live there unaccounted for, this through line of helping the people of these islands is left behind. Now more than ever though, wouldn't it be fitting for us to show up for those facing a dire situation population? If the residents of Greatfish Isle weren't destroyed alongside their home, what might have become of them? Once the Endless Night has taken hold, Link would be able to come across castaways flung far out to sea by the destruction of their island. They would either ask to be taken to a nearby island, a specific island where they have family, or maybe even back to Greatfish Isle. I think there probably only needs to be a handful of these castaways, and while I don't really have a specific vision for who these castaways would be, I could see this role being played by the Gorons. The only Gorons in the Wind Waker are these 3 traveling merchants who are part of Zunari's trading quest, so adding a few more to boost that small population works for me. The Gorons are usually main players in Zelda games, especially the 3D titles, so the way that there's so few of them in the Wind Waker feels kinda weird. It doesn't have to be just Gorons though. Other unseen characters like Beto's mom would make for a more substantial addition, as at this point it's very likely we've already met her son and received a letter from her. On top of that, ignoring the King of Red Lion's request to make our way to Windfall Island as quickly as possible and instead choosing to save any castaways we come across would also be a powerful moment, and maybe even plant the seeds that our boat friend might not actually know all there is to know and isn't immune to making the wrong decision. This is a smaller idea, and I can see people not actually enjoying it because sailing in the Wind Waker is already something that people love to complain about, so it's probably for the best that all of these characters just be heading for the islands that are easy to get to by using the Ballad of Gales. While I can see people not really enjoying having to stop whatever it is they're doing to help the castaways, I think it really adds to the weight of this moment while also providing a glimmer of hope in this dark time. I really wish we got to hang around Tetra's pirate crew a bit more. Outside of cutscenes, the only time that we actually really get to interact with the pirates is at the very beginning of the game. I think that's kind of a shame because there's already a really good setup in the game for more. After returning to the Forsaken Fortress following our unsuccessful first visit and finally rescuing Errol and these 2 other girls, the pirates show up. Tetra and her crew promise to return the girls home safely while Link takes care of some unfinished business. After this fantastic showdown against the Helmarok King, coming face to face with Ganondorf for the first time and making a daring escape, Tetra is separated from the rest of her pirate gang. Following her orders, the pirates help the girls make their way home, with the exception of Errol, who stays on their ship. Sometime later, Link receives a letter from her, where she tells about her time with the pirates, and it really helps characterize both the crew and Errol herself. I think this is really sweet, but it's a shame that we don't get anything past that, as Errol and the pirates don't show up again until the very final moments of the game. So what if they did show up again? Maybe after completing one of the later dungeons, the pirates' ship would make another appearance. Sailing close to it would allow us to climb on board and see the crew, which opens up the opportunity to see how they've been dealing since losing Tetra. It's also a chance to see the pirates under different circumstances, as they're now tasked with watching over this little girl. Sure, they're used to being bossed around by one, but do they know how to take care of one? How to entertain one? This is actually a very natural way to introduce Nico's affinity for making those little paper cutouts, like in the intros for the DS games. This is something that doesn't really need an origin, but I like the idea that his little hobby is one that was directly inspired by his time helping entertain Errol during her stint with the crew. Every other time Link boards the pirate ship, there's a little obstacle course for him to clear. Those previous courses were set up by Nico, but he's, this third one could be designed by Errol, showing that in her time away, she's still thinking of ways to connect with her brother. There wouldn't necessarily need to be a prize at the end of this course, as the real prize is spending time with your little sister, but it would be easy enough to add another treasure chart here if people really think that's necessary. Quick aside about the treasure charts, but I think there should be more of them. In the Wind Waker, there's 49 treasure chests to be found, which matches exactly with the 49 islands in the game, which is, that makes sense, but there could be more. There's no reason that there's only one per island. If the reason is that there's only one in every sector, we've gotten rid of the sectors already, so why not just add more treasures? I don't know, I really like searching for treasure. I think there could be more of them. I really think that more treasure charts makes for more worthwhile rewards. If there's more treasure charts, you have more good rewards to include on the platforms, so that way you're not disappointed when you get a Boko Baba seed. So there's like 20-something treasure charts that lead to silver rupees as a reward. If we take half of those charts and split them into twice as many treasure charts that lead towards orange rupees instead of silver rupees, you would still get the same amount of rupees at the end of collecting all of the treasures, but there's more treasure to get. This would also kind of introduce its own treasure chart hierarchy, wherein the ones that are easier to get will lead to orange rupees, and the ones that are obtained through more involved ways lead to better rewards. I just thought I'd mention it, take it or leave it. It's not a big deal. This whole thing is my personal opinion, so whatever. I'll get back to the pirates in just a second, but something I've always found a little bittersweet is that when you visit your grandma and she gives you soup, she always sends you on your way with 2 servings. This is probably just because she's a sweet old lady and wants to take care of you, but it can also be viewed as her being accustomed to making enough soup for both you and your sister. She even says it's not just your favorite, but Errol's too. So knowing this, why not bring her a taste of home? Again, I feel like this is just a sweet moment, and it doesn't really need a tangible reward. It's just nice to have these small moments where both of you get to remember what life was like before all of this, when the both of you just got to be kids. Wait, shit, I'm emotional. Why do I keep doing this to myself? Rounding off this section, instead of adding a little new vessel out on the waves for our hero to encounter, I think the Salvage Corps deserves a little bit of love. Outside of them giving you that treasure chart the first time you talk to them, they don't really have much to do. This is horrible. I think that they deserve a little bit more, and the way that I'm going to fix it is to make a simple concept much more complicated. Okay, so obviously the reward for dredging up sunken treasure is like the treasure. It has its own built-in immediate reward system. Every chest is already worth finding because you're already guaranteed a reward. But there could be something a little bit more going on here. How about this? The Salvage Corps in their first appearance already mentions to us that the grappling hooks used by the Rito on Dragon Roost Island are extremely useful for pulling up sunken treasure. Why not take it just one step further, have them mention that if we can get our hands on a grappling hook, they'll make us an honorary member of their little crew. With that, we make our way to Dragon Roost Island, shenanigans ensue, and along the way we get ourselves a grappling hook. Upon our next encounter, the Salvage Corps would claim us as an honorary recruit, and tell us that if we can track down 13 treasure charts and get a hold of whatever lay where X marks the spot, they'll be impressed and consider letting us move up in the ranks. Running into them again after some time has passed, the Salvage Corps would congratulate us and reward us with a bronze diver's helmet, and send us out to find another 13 sunken treasures. Time passes, we find more treasure, and then we get a silver helmet, and then later on we do the same and we get a golden helmet. These helmets would all be compatible with the joy pedestals found on islands, which would make this another way of finding items to decorate. And because of their compatibility with those joy pedestals, this also makes them an additional set of things to carry in the delivery bag, which I just think is kind of cool. You get the grappling hook in the same place you get the delivery bag. After receiving the gold helmet, if we then make our way to Windfall Island, we'd see that the Salvage Corps' little ship is parked at the little dock. They're all up at the cafe bragging to other patrons about how a member of their group has sailed all around the Great Sea collecting treasure left and right. Approaching them at the cafe, they'd all very excitedly greet you and praise you for your accomplishment. As one final reward and kind of just like a bonus thing, I like it when Link gets to wear funny little outfits. And so, as a sign that you really are one of them, Link would be given his very own official Salvage Corps helmet. This would purely be a cosmetic upgrade, kind of like Mario's vacation outfit in Mario Sunshine. What can I say? I love dressing up these little blorbos. Look at the little scrimbly, little gobble 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 gobble. Okay. We've talked about the sea, we've talked about the stuff there is to do at sea, but what about the way we get around the sea? The King of Red Lions, our boat and bestest friend in the whole wide world, is one of the most common inclusions on lists of reasons why The Wind Waker is an unplayable nightmare game for babies. Something I personally find a bit silly is just how indestructible the king is. Like, cannon fire in this game shatters boulders, but for some reason doesn't even seem to leave a scratch on this old boy. The lack of difficulty in The Wind Waker is probably one of the most common talking points among people who only play video games to suffer, but that's usually just in reference to the dungeons. It's not common for something to be seen as a strength and also a weakness, and this is a spot where I'm conflicted. I love sailing. The vibes out here are just unmatched, but at the same time, I feel a little let down by how impossible it is to die out at sea. I don't know, despite being a 12-year-old on a wooden sailboat in the middle of the Dern Ocean, it's actually kind of chill out here. I've never encountered the game over screen while sailing. I don't think I've even come close. Even in spots where there are massive swarms of enemies, it's easy enough to just take all the hits and get out of there. This was actually one of the things they amended in Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, as the travel sections in these games have their own separate heart count. This choice was perfect for these games, as it makes it much more important for us to pay attention to what's happening around us while we travel. To put this in perspective, the DS titles are very simple when compared to other Zelda games, yet I have seen these game over screens far more often than this one. I don't know, maybe this is just a skill issue, but a big part of this is probably because of a relatively small change. I don't actually know if this has an official name, so I'm just gonna call it the Blue Heart system. This system works so well, I'm pretty sure you can just copy and paste it here and it would work perfectly. Well, mostly perfectly. In Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, the Blue Heart system is tied to upgrading your ship or train. And while that's fun in those games, it doesn't really fit with what's happening in the Wind Waker because the boat is like a character. You can't really upgrade him. So I think the best way to include the Blue Heart system without the ship customization mechanic is by connecting the two health systems together. In the Wind Waker, there are two ways to increase Link's heart count: collecting heart containers, which increases it by 1, or by collecting heart pieces, 4 of which will grant 1 heart container. Taking this one step further, Link collecting 4 heart containers would grant him an additional blue heart while aboard the King of Red Lions. This ultimately acts as an additional reward for those actively seeking out all that the Great Sea has to offer. Actively searching for more heart pieces will quickly increase Link's heart count, which also builds towards the eventual goal of collecting more blue hearts, which in turn makes it easier to go out and explore and seek out more rewards. The flip side of this is that the people who stick exclusively to the critical path will have limited access to health upgrades, as most of the heart pieces are collected by actively seeking them out. I think this is also a good place to mention that I think that we could introduce a whole new collectible, that being the blue heart container. The blue heart container would have no effect on Link's heart count, exclusively increasing the number of hits the King of Red Lions can take. This would be a very rare reward, and I think it would definitely have to be tied to more lengthy quests, maybe ones that take place at sea. I don't know, for example, maybe that trading sequence with the Windfall sailors. Yeah, you didn't think I was just going to introduce a quest without having thought of a fitting reward for it, did you? Boom. Full circle, baby, full circle. Okay, so sailing can be slow, and needing to play the Wind's Requiem every time the wind direction needs to be changed can start to get tedious at a certain point. Both of these issues were addressed when Wind Waker HD was released, as it introduced the Swift Sail. The Swift Sail is an item that doubles sailing speed and also makes it so that the wind direction always matches the direction that the boat faces. I don't like the Swift Sail. So, to help illustrate why, as a quick timeline, the player is first introduced to the King of Red Lions after washing up on Windfall Island. He tells us some backstory stuff and sends us on an errand to find a sail. After purchasing the sail and taking to the seas, we eventually land on Dragon Roost Island. It's here where Link gets the Wind Waker. After making our way through Dragon Roost Cavern, the first dungeon of the game, we're rewarded with Din's Pearl. At this point, in case you missed it on your way up, we're pointed towards this shrine where we can learn the Wind's Requiem, which is the song that allows Link to alter the direction of the wind. It's at this point in the game where the path we're intended to follow would lead us to the next main point of interest, the Forest Haven, but there's nothing stopping us from heading back toward Windfall Island. At night, there's an auction held, which is where the Swift Sail can be found. Collecting rupees is pretty easy in the Wind Waker, so it's not difficult to get a hold of this item at this point in the game, even though it is a little bit expensive. This is my main problem with the Swift Sail. Not only does its introduction here replace the sail that we just got, because of its gimmick of always having the wind blow the direction we're trying to go, it also makes the Wind's Requiem, a song we just learned, much less useful. And that in turn drastically reduces the importance of the Wind Waker, you know, the namesake of the game. I do think upgrading the sail is a good concept, but in its current form, the Swift Sail is just too much too soon. Something I actually like about the Swift Sail, though, is that it comes from Zunari. That makes sense. He is the guy we bought the first sail from, so his involvement in getting the upgrade feels natural. I don't like that it's an auction item, though, partially because of how easy it makes it to get, and partially just because I'm not a fan of the auction. I can understand why the Swift Sail is where it is. There's not a lot of room to include new items in a game that's already been fully designed, and the auction was just the easiest way to do that. It's just a part of the game I don't enjoy playing, though the treasure chart you can win here that leads to a single rupee is hilarious, and actually kind of paints Zunari as a bit of a con man. It's like he drew this chart and put the chest here himself, and that's just fun characterization. Anyway, okay, Swift Sail. Zunari. Another part of the game that Zunari plays an important role in is the trading sequence. He gives us the item that kicks it off and also rewards us with the extremely powerful magic armor. The only other reward in this trading sequence is a piece of heart given to us from this Goron in exchange for a statue of the little big man himself. My suggestion then is that the Swift Sail actually take the place of the magic armor and offer the magic armor as a reward a little later in the sequence, both adding a bit of substance to getting the Swift Sail as well as making us have to work a bit more to get the magic armor. Having a secondary reward here makes it so players are more likely to see the side quest through to the end, as the rewards here are a bit more evenly spaced, which is good for morale. This version of the Swift Sail would provide a 50% speed increase and be more efficient at catching the wind, reducing the slowdown experience while not directly following the wind. So, like, if the wind is blowing north, adjusting the boat to go northwest or northeast won't slow us down. This, I think, is a good enough upgrade to our base sailing skills. It's much less powerful than Wind Waker HD's Swift Sail, so I think getting it a little bit earlier in the game wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. But that version of the Swift Sail does exist for a reason, so we should try and find a way to include that here. Maybe not as a sail, but it definitely has a place here. Remember that shrine I mentioned earlier? Part of that shrine is this set of monuments to the deities of the wind, the Frog Brothers Zephos and Cyclos. Zephos' monument is the one inscribed with the Wind's Requiem. Playing this song will get his attention and he'll greet us as the new Waker of Winds. Cyclos' monument, however, has been broken, so he's acting out and summoning these massive dangerous cyclones out at sea. After obtaining the hero's bow, we can shoot him down and he'll teach us the Ballad of Gales, which is probably the song that was inscribed on his monument. The Ballad of Gales is this game's fast travel, so it warps you around. it gets you places quickly. These interactions are brief, which makes sense. They've probably got lots of important wind business to attend to, but dang it, I wish we got more of these too. You can probably already tell, but I'm a sucker for deeper characterization, and the thing about these two is it feels that there's a story here that was just dropped halfway through the game. So my idea would be to add another set of these monuments, one on Gale Isle and one on Headstone Island. These are the islands that house the last 2 dungeons of the game, but more importantly, in context, these islands were essentially holy sites where the ancient sages would focus their energy to empower the Master Sword. Maybe monuments to the gods would have been placed here to ward against evil in an effort to protect the sages. I mean, we know how well that worked out, but still. These monuments would be inscribed with one half of a song, and after seeing both halves, Link would be able to play a new song, the duet of Zephyrs and Cyclones. And upon playing it, both of the wind deities would appear, as they hadn't heard that song in a long time. These are ancient sites after all. Here we'd get a scene between the two of them. Zephos would comment on how Cyclos has calmed down and that he's proud of his brother for having grown so much since they were last together, and Cyclos would do that younger sibling thing and act like he doesn't care, even though it's very obvious that he does. They'd notice Link and thank him for playing that old song, and they'd mention that if ever he needed a favorable wind to just play it once again, as they'd love to hear it. Playing this song would essentially activate Wind Waker HD's version of the Swift Sail, doubling Link's sailing speed and have the wind follow him wherever he goes. This way, however, it's recontextualized as the wind gods directly aiding Link in his adventure. Maybe they'd even follow behind Link while the song is in effect, in reference to the fact that during development of the game, a frog riding a cloud was planned to be Link's companion in the same way that Link had fairy companions in previous games. I'm actually kinda proud of this idea because it allows for better sailing while still making use of the Wind Waker, and it acts as a satisfying conclusion to the implied conflict between Zephos and Cyclos. This even adds an extra thing to do on these islands, as originally the only thing to really do on them was overcome the dungeons. In the same way that we've brought a satisfying conclusion to Zephos and Cyclos' story, we've also brought this video to a satisfying conclusion. Yeah, let's go. And that is the end of the video. Before I get into talking about, all of the normal YouTube things, I wanted to really quickly ask a favor and point you towards a couple of links that you can click in the description of this video, and also just always in my link tree. You can access that pretty much anywhere. The first one is a link to the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, which is a charity that is getting medical aid to kids in Palestine. You can make a one-time donation or sign up for a monthly donation and help get money to them. As far as I can understand, the more money that they have, the better care that they can provide. But if you are worried because you have heard that humanitarian aid has been purposefully barred from entering Palestine by the IDF, you can also click on one of the other links, which will take you to Operation Olive Branch, which is a massive spreadsheet that will direct you to hundreds of donation pages where you can get money directly to people in Palestine. And I know hundreds of donation pages sounds really intimidating. Don't feel like you need to donate to all of them. Just focus on some of the ones that are maybe not as close to being funded as others, and then share that spreadsheet with other people to help these people meet their goals. A lot of this money is being collected so that people can flee. It's so insane to me that it costs money for them to leave their home that has been destroyed around them. I think it's horrible that they need to pay to leave, but they do. And I would also ask to please contact your representatives. There are emails that you can send, phone calls that you can make. There are a lot of ways that we can get in touch with people who are responsible for making the decision to demand a ceasefire. I've spent so long making this video that I felt like I could take a couple of minutes to talk about something far more important than my goofy little project that I've been working on. If you have the means, please consider donating. If you don't, please share links and get in contact with your representatives. I don't know much about the United States, but I do know that here in Canada there are lots of small local representatives that you can easily find the numbers of, so please consider doing that. Anyway, yeah, I'm gonna do the normal closing thing now. I know it's probably a little bit unexpected to have something like this right at the end of a very much lighthearted video, but if I'm taking the time to make something like this, I want people to know that there is something that they can do. Thank you for sticking through it. If you sat all the way through the video to this point of the video, I'm not reading from a script anymore because we're very much in the future and I'm in a different recording spot, so if it sounds different, that is why. I've never made a project like this before, and it's a whole bunch of stuff that I did not know how to do, and now I feel like I know more about how to do it. This was mostly just something that I wanted to do for fun, and I had a lot of fun making it. Although, of course, I have more stuff that I want to make, and as a fun little surprise, if you didn't know this going into this video, this is just the first episode of what I currently have planned to be a 3-episode series kind of thing. This was mostly just to see if I could do it. The original plan was to do all of my ideas in one video, but then I really quickly realized that would be way too much work for a first ever project like this, and so I split it up into 3. So this was kind of like the pilot episode of the series going forward from here. It might not be like the next thing that I make, but it definitely will be happening. I have a lot of the stuff ready for it, I just need to make it. But it's definitely not my plan to make things just about The Legend of Zelda. I've got a whole bunch of other interests and things that I enjoy. I'm a whole 3-dimensional person. You know that already just by looking at me, but yeah, I've got a bunch of different video games and movies and books and music that I want to talk about. I feel very lucky that I have the chance to do something like this, to learn a skill like this, and I don't really want to go on for too long, you know. If you like the video, you can like it. If you want to see more, please subscribe. If you have something that you would like to say to me, you can leave it in the comments. I'm gonna do my best to get back to all of them. I feel like it won't be too difficult. So if you have something you want to say, you can let me know. I would really appreciate it. If you are interested, you might have seen it when you watched the video. I made a whole bunch of artwork, and that was one of the most fun parts about this, was making a whole bunch of fun little goofy guys to decorate my video with. And if you liked any of them, you can join my Patreon, which is something that I'm not super familiar with, but I'm figuring that out too. I've got all of the original files available for download, so you can have them to print out or to I guess printing them out is kind of the biggest thing that you can do with them. But yeah, that's kind of just like an extra thing. You are absolutely not obligated to do that. It would just be an extra bonus thing that you could do that would really help me out. And it would also make me feel good about having spent so much time making this stuff. I've got not just the fun little people that I drew, but also all of the sea chart artwork will be available there. There's a bunch of stuff that I haven't used yet, but it will be used in the future. So if you want to take a good long look at the stuff that I made for this video and also get a sneak peek at stuff that I made for future videos, you can look there. But mostly it's, you know, I've never done it before, so if there's anything that you would like to see from me, you can suggest it, and maybe I'll make that an extra thing that I make as a reward. And just as one last little trick that I've played on you all, it was my birthday yesterday, so by watching this video, you have given me a birthday present. I've been Jam. Thanks for letting me babble.